Listening to that is Dr. Alan Mendoza, founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, and John Rees, co-founder of the Stop the War Coalition. John, you go first. You think that this should very much have been a question of Parliament making the decision?
Yes, I think it's a question of basic democratic principle that if you're going to spend millions of taxpayers' pounds on an airstrike like this, put in danger the lives of the people carrying out the airstrikes, not to mention killing another country's citizens, that ought to be a decision which parliamentarians at least take. And it's not just a question of whether parliamentarians are excluded if you don't do that. It doesn't allow, if there isn't a parliamentary debate, ordinary members of the public to lobby their MPs and express their views about this before a decision is taken. Now, this is why this country is suffering a democratic deficit, because people think that things are being done behind closed doors, that they're being excluded from debate. And to have a Prime Minister that's never been elected in a general election, assisted by Baron Cameron, a Foreign Secretary who isn't even elected as an MP, but sits by appointment in the House of Lords, taking these decisions which will affect this country, which may provoke terrorist responses, which certainly won't be over in one airstrike, is an absolutely disastrous decision. And coming from the same people that made disastrous decisions about Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya, which was only airstrikes, but destroyed an entire society.
Dr. Alan Mendoza, what do you make of that?
Well, it's nonsense, isn't it? The reality is, as the Foreign Secretary has pointed out, this has been heavily trailed. This is not a sudden surprise where we woke up one morning to discover that a war had broken out. This has been on the cards for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's been on the cards from the United Nations Security Council, which also stated quite clearly that there was a problem here and they needed to be resolved. Everyone agreed across the board internationally that there was a problem. We've had a multinational coalition supporting the strikes with the leader of the opposition on board. Nobody is seriously objecting, and Parliament will have its opportunity to debate this week. So I really think that we've got to take account of the nature of the operation. It's a one-off for the moment. No doubt if there are others, there will be discussions in Parliament around it, but you do have to preserve some operational safety and security around it, and telegraphing to your opponents, hey, we're coming in on this time and this date, is not the way to do that.
John, that seems to be the slam dunk argument there, is that once you say you're going to bomb someone, they move.
Well, he can't have it both ways, can he? Either this was flagged up for days in advance and therefore we all knew it was going to happen and therefore we didn't need a parliamentary debate, or you have to not do that because of the question of moving targets. So that argument is a self-contradictory nonsense.
Actually, that's true, Alan, isn't it? You did contradict yourself there.
No, it isn't, because, of course, the point about deterrence and prevention is that you're trying to deter someone from doing something. The whole point is the Houthis were continuing their attacks, i.e. they had their pieces
if you're deterring them, then they know.
In place. No, then they desist and cease, but they weren't doing that. So they kept their armed items of force in place for them to commit attacks, and that's what we were responding to.
John.
This is very, very silly. There's been a 9-year war by the Saudis against the Houthis, using British arms, pilots trained by the British. The Houthis have been at war with Western-backed armies for 9 years. So believe me, they don't need 2 extra days to be able to prepare for an air attack.
Could you just help me understand that the situation in Yemen from your point of view, John? Are you basically saying the Houthis need to win this war to stop it? Is that where you are?
No, I think what my position is this, really, that the British ought to keep out of the Middle East. This is a former British colony. Yemen was a former British colony. It's been bombed for 9 years by a British ally, British-supplied, British-trained troops from Saudi Arabia. It would really be better, given our record in Afghanistan, given the record in Iraq, given the record in Libya, if we didn't begin the process of destroying another Middle Eastern country.
Alan, where are you on that?
Well, Yemen, I'm afraid, was not a British colony. I think he's referring to Aden, but that tells you the quality of debate here, basically, which is he doesn't know his facts. The reality is that Yemen was independent in 1918. No, it isn't the same
area.
That is an
Aden is
appalling
part of
comment
Yemen.
to make. It is part of Yemen, but it's a very small part, a sliver.
Yeah.
Now, it's an appalling comment to make, and it tells you the lack of knowledge of this area.
Believe me, people
the
in
reality
Yemen
here
understand this very well.
Oh, good. So I'm pleased you're speaking on their behalf. Now, the reality is
Well, I know
that, of course,
Hang on, John.
there's been a terrible war. There's been a terrible war that has taken place there. Nobody is suggesting we're getting involved in that war. What we are getting involved in is attacks on international shipping in international waters, which is clearly unacceptable to all parties. That is the only thing we're trying to stop. We're not trying to help either side win the Yemen war.
Right. So what do you think, then, Rishi Sunak needs to do next, Alan Mendoza?
Well, I think we've laid a marker down. We and Americans and others have said, you now know what will happen if you continue with your attacks. The game is now whether the other side wishes to escalate. The next stage will be we'll bomb further targets. If crucially they decide to retaliate or escalate on their side.
And John, I was going to say, John, your issue will be, I know you'll jump on that, John, because you will say we are therefore on the path to invading.
Well, exactly. Yet again, Alan Mendoza has contradicted himself. First of all, we don't have to have a proper parliamentary debate because it's only one raid. Now, as is absolutely obvious to anybody, it won't just be one raid. So by the same logic, we should have had a parliamentary debate because we are precisely going to be embroiled in yet another conflict in the Middle East, which we will lose because there is no single possibility of displacing the Houthis as a regime in the Yemen.
Alan, do you think we can sort this out from the air? Because we've been very unsuccessful in doing that with all the other conflicts.
Well, you asked me where Rishi Sunak should be going with this at the moment. I'm going to continue before coming into it. The reality is the decision for whether this goes into conflict or not is not actually going to be decided in London, Washington, or even Gaza, Jerusalem. It's going to happen in Tehran. The Iranians are the Houthis' backers. They are also the backers of Hezbollah, the backers of Hamas. They are the people who, since October the 7th, have been spiralling in tensions in the region. The reality here is very simple. If I was Rishi Sunak, I would be sending a strong message like the Americans have done to Iran, saying, we will hold you responsible for any further action by your proxies. And thus far, that has worked in the past to stop them from doing things.